Good evening, everyone. Today we are starting Siman Yud, Iggeres HaKodesh, page 228. A new letter. And who would like to take a guess about what the topic of this letter is? No guesses? Okay, this letter is about tzedakah.
Last week.
Yes. I told you in advance that most of the letters of Iggeres HaKodesh are about tzedakah. That is correct. So,
written in different years, right?
Yes, as I've mentioned in the past, every year the Alter Rebbe would write a fundraising letter on behalf of the Chassidim in Eretz Yisrael. But the fundraising letters, as mentioned also several times, all of them are deep concepts in Chassidus regarding the mitzvah of tzedakah. So, in the past, the Alter Rebbe has talked about the impact of tzedakah, the spiritual impact and benefits that a person has from giving tzedakah. In the last lesson, in the last letter that we learned in Siman Tes, the Alter Rebbe spoke about the attitude a person is supposed to have towards tzedakah. In this letter, the Alter Rebbe is going to tackle how much tzedakah is a person supposed to give. So, in general, we know that there are the guidelines in halacha that supposed to give 10%, and mitzvah min hamufchar, if you want to do even better, give 20%, and we'll see how the Alter Rebbe deals with that. Because I think the Alter Rebbe wants the Chassidim maybe to give a little more than that, or a lot more than that, and how does the Alter Rebbe justify that halachically? And this is what we're going to be learning about in this letter, how much tzedakah a person is supposed to give.
Did the Hasidim listen to what he sent them?
I would assume so. I mean, we know that huge sums of money were sent to Eretz Yisrael, yeah. Okay, page 228. Achar Drisha Shalom V'chaim, after, the Alter Rebbe begins the letter by saying, after I appropriately inquire regarding your well-being, right, your welfare, and how your life is coming along. Pesach Devarai Yoir Oizen Shemas Techachas Chaim. The opening of my words should awaken the ear that hears, the ear that listens to Techachas Chaim, the Musar of life. And which Musar is he talking about? Very specifically, Asherechiach Hashem Chaim, the admonishment that Hashem gave, the living Hashem gave, Al Yidei Nevi'ah, through his prophet. Va'amar, the Navi who says, Chaste Hashem ki leisamnu v'gomer. Which Navi said that?
Shaya?
Where's the pasuk from?
They have a song.
I know, but the pasuk didn't come from a song. The song came from a pasuk.
It's a famous song.
Yes, there are quite a few songs on these words. The pasuk is a pasuk in Eicha. So the Navi who wrote it was Yirmiyahu. So Yirmiyahu says, Chaste Hashem kiloi samnu kiloi chalu rachamav. What does it mean? What does Chaste Hashem kiloi samnu mean? So we always go to our resident Israeli over here.
He won't refrain from giving.
You're not our resident Israeli.
No.
Sason, translate. Chaste Hashem kiloi samnu. Or Chaste Hashem kilo tamnu.
Thank God, the Chasadim of HaKodesh Baruch Hu did not stop.
Good. Chaste Hashem, the Chasadim of Hashem, they did not stop. How do you say they did not stop?
You don't say lo tamu, you say lo... Maybe you say Mshichu.
Do we say something similar in davening every day? We say Hatoiv Ki lechalu rachamecha v'hamerachem Ki leisamu chasadecha.
Same word.
What does samu mean? Samu means they have not been completed or depleted, right? They're But the pasuk doesn't say Chaste Hashem ki leisamu. It says Chaste Hashem ki leisamnu. What does samnu mean? And even in the pasuk,
from the word maneya.
Again, the pasuk Chaste Hashem, the Chasadim of Hashem ki leisamnu, ki lechalu rachamav, because his mercies have not concluded, right? But what does samnu mean? Samnu means we have not completed. Samnu means we have not completed. What is samnu? It's we. So what is Chaste Hashem ki leisamnu? How many times have we sung the song? And how many times have we sung? What does that mean? What does it mean, Chaste Hashem ki leisamnu? It should be Chaste Hashem ki leitamu. The Chasadim of Hashem never ended, never stopped.
Yeah, we never stopped praising Hashem.
But that's not what that's not what it means. In fact, Rashi on the pasuk says that samnu kemoi samu, samnu and samu, but it's not. And if it's like samu, so say samu. Why doesn't it say chaste Hashem kilei samu or kilei tamu kilei chalu rachamav? Just like we say atav kilei chalu rachamecha hamerachim kilei samu chasadecha. It's a klutz kasha, pashta question.
It's a Balabavsha question.
Right?
I had another bi'ur for litmon. It's to hide.
That's what the
But
test.
it's that, right?
The pasuk should have said chaste Hashem kilei samu, that the chasadim of Hashem never have been completed. In other words, they've never ended. As we say in davening, kilei samu chasadecha. So why samnu instead of samu? V'yuvan, this will be understood al pi masher kasav b'Zohar HaKodesh, based on what it says in the Zohar, that is chesed v'is chesed. That there are two levels of chesed. Is chesed oilam chulu. There's one chesed which is called chesed oilam. V'is, and then there is chesed ilah, a supernal chesed, duhu rav chesed, v'chulu, which is the madriga of rav chesed, abundant chesed. As we say in the Yud Gimel Midas Harachim, Hashem, Kel Rachim V'Chanan Erech Apayim V'Rav Chesed. Not Stam Chesed, but V'Rav Chesed. So there are two madrigas of Chesed. There is Chesed Oilam, which is Hashem's Chesed, which is limited and descends into this world, and our world is able to contain it. And then there is Rav Chesed, which is a higher madriga of Chesed, which is the infinite Chesedim of Hashem. What does that mean? What is the functions? What are the respective functions of these two levels of chesed? So that's what we'll figure out in Mitzvah Hashem as we continue in this letter. So what we're right now is what we're shelving. What we're putting aside is the question that we had: why it says chaste Hashem kilei samnu instead of chaste Hashem kilei samu, and also we have to keep in mind this idea of two madrigas in chesed. It is known that HaTorah nikras oiz. The Torah is called oiz. The pasuk says Hashem oiz la'ama yitain, Hashem yivarech esame b'shalom, and this Chazal say oiz. What is oiz? Ein oiz ela Torah. Torah is called oiz. What is oiz? Shehu lashon gevura. Oiz is gevura. Sorry? Strength. So Torah is connected to the idea of gevura. Yeah. Amru Chazal, and as Chazal tell us, Taryag mitzvahs nemru l'meisha misinai mipi hagvura, that the Yidden we received. Gemara says that we received 613 mitzvahs. Moshe received at Har Sinai 613 mitzvahs from where? Mipi hagvura. Now we know that the Eibishter has some several names, and then there are the official names: Yud Kei Vav Kei, Keil, Elikim. Then there are unofficial names called kinuyim, different names which Chazal call Hashem by, and one of them is Gevura. Now we know that when Chazal choose to say a certain name of Hashem, it wasn't just random, it wasn't eeny, meeny, miny, mo, which name are we going to use right now? But rather, it's because there's a specific connection between what they're talking about and that specific name or expression of Hashem. So for example, many times in the Gemara, so the Eibishter is called Rachmana, the merciful one, which implies chesed, or implies rachamim. And over here, when we're talking about Torah was received mipi hagvura, which once again implies the idea, the connection of Torah with gevura. Moreover, ukidiksiv, as the pasuk says, mi minoi eish das lomai, that the Torah was given from Hashem's right hand. And what is the Torah? The das, the laws of the Torah are eish, are fire. And we know also that fire is a metaphor for gevura. Water is chesed, fire is gevura. And we see over here that Torah is compared to fire. So the Alter Rebbe brings over here three different sources that indicate, each one of them, that the Torah is connected to gevura. Number one, Hashem oiz la'ama yitain. Torah is called oiz, which is gevura. Number two, the whole Torah was given mipi hagvura. And number three, that the Torah is eish das lomei. The Torah is called eish. So the Torah is associated with gevura.
What's lama? What's translation lama?
Lama to us, the Torah mimina from Hashem's right, and the eish das, the law, which is a fire, came lama to him, to Moshe to us.
Like Aramaic word. It's Aramaic, right?
Which word?
Lama.
It's in the Torah. It's a pasuk in Hazino.
Oh.
Yeah.
Us, but you have different. You have different.
Now, lama means to him.
Oh, me to him.
Okay, so I'm going to repeat this again. So we're seeing over here, the Alter Rebbe is demonstrating that the Torah is related to Gevura, fire. Torah is Gevura. Everyone's fine with that?
Well, what's my problem?
Torah is Gevura. What is the opposite of Gevura? The opposite of Gevura
Malicious.
is Chesed. In the Midas of Hashem, right? You have Chesed and Gevura.
Yeah.
Is Torah Chesed or is Torah Gevura?
Hesed.
It's more chesed.
Torah is Chesed?
No.
No?
Or it's chesed.
Torah is Chesed? No? What is the most popular metaphor we use to describe Torah?
Water.
Water. What is water? Water is Chesed. It's not a Chesed of Hashem that He gave us the Torah. How is Torah Gevura? Moreover, if you look at the last proof that the Alter Rebbe gave, what does the pasuk says? Miyaminoi eish das lamai. That we got this Torah, which is a Torah of fire, from where? Miyaminoi, from Hashem's right hand. What is the right hand?
Chesed.
The right hand is Chesed. So how are we saying over here that the Torah is Gevura?
Gevura.
When Torah is compared to water, water is a metaphor for Chesed. Yeah, we found one time Taka where Torah is called Eish. We know the famous pasuk that Rebbe talks about this in Kutei Amarim. Hoi kol tzomei l'chul hamayim. All those who are thirsty should go to water. And what is the water reference to over there? To Torah. And Torah is the Chesed of Hashem. So why is he saying it's Gevura? So before we get to the answer to that question, we need to actually bolster our question a little. When we say Torah is Chesed, the Chesed of Hashem, we don't only mean that the act of Matan Torah was an act of Chesed, that Hashem did us a Chesed and He gave us Torah. It's much deeper than that. Torah is Chesed. The whole function and the idea and the concept of Torah is Chesed. What is Chesed? Chesed is Hamshacha, Hashpah, Gilui, giving, revelation. The revelation of Hashem is Chesed. When Hashem withholds, when Hashem conceals, when He contracts, that's Gevura. What is the function of Torah mitzvahs? Why did Hashem give us Torah mitzvahs? The function of Torah mitzvahs is that through mitzvahs, we cause a Gili Elokus, we reveal Hashem here in this world. Every mitzvah we do, we're revealing Hashem within ourselves and also within that part of the world which was engaged in doing that mitzvah. So the essence of Torah is Chesed. It's not only that it was a Chesed that Hashem gave us the Torah. The whole point of Torah is to cause this Gili Elokus, this revelation, and this flow of divine energy into this world over here, which is essentially Chesed. As Alter Rebbe says, we learned this earlier on in Tanya, in Perich of Gimel. He says, we know that there are 248 mitzvahs and they correspond to the 248 limbs. And it says, the Tikkun Ezer tells us, the Ramach Pikudin Inun Ramach Evren de Malka, the 248 commandments, they're the 248 limbs of Hashem. What does that mean? What does it mean that the 248 mitzvahs are the 248 limbs of Hashem? What does that mean?
Limbs of Hashem? Limbs of Hashem has...
No. It says, the Tikkun Ezer says that the Ramach Pikudin, which means the 248 mitzvahs, Inun, they are Ramach Evrin de Malka, the 248 limbs of the king, of Hashem. The mitzvahs are the limbs of Hashem. I'll try to discuss this at length in Perich Chav Gimel, in the Kutei Amarim. What does that mean? What is a limb? How do you define a limb anyways? We all have them. But what is the definition of a limb? Yeah, but it still has to make sense. What does it mean that it's the limbs of Hashem? What is to understand that? We have to understand first of all what is a limb? It's not a very difficult question. We all have them. If you had to define a limb, what would it be? Well, what is the definition of a limb? Of an aver? It's a tough question, I guess.
You do with the whole Averim, Ratzon Hashem.
Yeah, but what's the definition? What is an aver? How would it define it? He wants a synonym, I guess.
Not a synonym.
synonym is that it's a limb. That's
No, but there might be another word for it. What does he want now?
That's what I'm waiting for.
No, but I don't understand the question.
No. Really, we have.
If you don't have another-
You have a finger, you have a toe, you have a nose, you have ears. What makes them limbs? What makes them?
A portion
They're
of
attached to the person.
They're attached to the person. Very good. Okay, so if I took a pen and I took some super glue and I put it right here, okay, a pen sticking up. So do I now have 249 limbs? It's attached to me.
goes against.
So there's something more than being attached, right? What is it? That the nefesh expresses itself through the limbs. Every limb is a keli, is a vessel, a vehicle for the nefesh to express itself. Actually, last night I was driving back. I was at a wedding last night in Lakewood. Coming back, so I have my wife in my car, my daughter's in my car. My daughter learned how to drive recently. Yeah, watch out for all of you, those of you who are drivers. No, Baruch Hashem, she's a good driver. No, I was driving, but we're having a conversation, and she says to me, "You should know that until I got my license, I always wondered. I see you're driving the car. How do you know how much you're supposed to turn the wheel? Like if you want to make a complete turn, or if you want to just turn to the next lane, or you're just taking a curve. How do you know how much exactly how to turn the wheel?
You feel it as you do it. That's it.
And then she says, but once I got my license and I started driving, I realized that it's intuitive. Your hands, when your head says I need a turn, you're not making any effort or thought in moving your hands, because your hands are just channeling your desire to move, and it's automatic. Now, if you ask me right now, how much do I have to turn the wheels in order to make a complete turn? I have no idea. I actually don't know. And I've been driving for many years. Anyone who, I don't know if everyone over here drives, but if you drive, you understand what we're saying. There's a certain, that what is a limb? A limb it's a bottle to the body, and it channels and expresses the body to the point of absolute oneness. And yeah, so the pen, which I attach to my finger, it might be attached to me, but it doesn't channel me. It doesn't express my desire, my will. It doesn't follow.
Carry out.
Right, it doesn't carry out. Whereas my finger, within my hands, it's me to the point that they actually express me, my neshama, my desire. When I want to do something, my fingers automatically move, because my neshama is within every one of my limbs. When we say that Ramach Pikudin Inun Ramach Evren Demalko, when we say that 248 limbs are mitzvahs are the limbs of Hashem, what that means to say is that the 248 mitzvahs, every single one of them draws down the energy of Hashem into it. Just like there's the neshama expresses itself in the 248 limbs. In this case, the neshama is Hashem, and the limbs of Hashem are the mitzvahs. And every single time we do a mitzvah, we're drawing down Hashem. Just like the finger draws down the neshama in a certain way, the ear in a different way, because the ear draws out from the neshama the koyach of hearing, and the eye draws out the koyach of seeing. And if my ear decided to doodle a drawing, it wouldn't work. That comes dafka out. That koyach of the neshama comes out specifically in my fingers. Right? It's all the neshama, but each limb expresses the neshama in a certain way. The same thing is every single mitzvah. That's what happens. Every single mitzvah is a mechanism to draw Hashem into this world and into all the worlds and into ourselves. Just like a limb is a mechanism, is a vehicle to draw the neshama into itself. So with this understanding, we understand that mitzvahs are chesed. That is the Torah is chesed. That is their definition. The whole point of Torah is drawing Hashem into this world, which is a radical understanding of the function of Torah. It's not like so many people think, oh, Hashem created the world, and one day he looks down and says, oh my gosh, that place is a jungle. Okay, what do? I have to give them a Torah and teach them how to live lives that are, number one, ethical and moral, and that they shouldn't kill each other, and they shouldn't harm each other. And maybe I'll even give them some laws to make them into more spiritual beings, because otherwise they're just a bunch of animals over there. So that's why he gave us the Torah. That's totally not why he gave us the Torah. The Torah is not to civilize us. That's not the function of Torah. That's a byproduct of Torah. That's not the function of Torah. That is the purpose of the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, which we've had ever since the beginning of time. We had 6 mitzvahs were given first to Adam HaRishon, and then Noach, once meat became permitted, so then they had to add the 7th mitzvah, which is not to eat Avram and Achai. But from the beginning of time, we were already given a code of law to civilize us. And the purpose of the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach is L'Shevas Yitzara, that the world should function as a functioning civilized society. Mitzvahs are very different. It's not that we have 613 mitzvahs and Goyim Lahavdil have 7 mitzvahs, so it's not, it's a quantity difference. We have 606 mitzvahs more. No, we have 613 mitzvahs more than them. Because even the mitzvahs that they have, which we have also, it's not the same. When a Yid does a mitzvah, Yid is bringing down a lakus into the world. The function of Torah mitzvahs is to bring a lakus down into this world. That was what happened by Har Sinai. By Har Sinai, and this is something which we've definitely mentioned before, that the Medrash says, it gives a mashal that there were two regions or 2 provinces that were at war with each other. The Medrash talks about Rami and Syria, Rome and Syria. I don't know if that corresponds, the Syria corresponds with the Syria of today. I don't know. Reb Nassan?
It's Greece.
This Syria is Greece. Okay? So according to Reb Nassan, it means Greece. But bottom line is, it's not so relevant. But the Medrash says, and the people from the different countries were not allowed to go from one country to the next, like Russia and Ukraine today. Can't. The borders are shut. And then one day, the Gzeira was rescinded, and B'nai Rami Yalo Syria, B'nai Syria Yerudul L'Rami. The people of Rome were able to go to Syria. The people of Syria were able to go to Rome. Rome is all of Italy. It was just the.
No, Rome is the whole.
So you're saying that Rami and Syria represent empires? They're not. Got it. Okay. Bakapanim. And it says the same thing, that when Hashem created the world, the first thing there was a divide. Hashemayim, Shemayim LaHashem, Va'aretz Nasan Livnei Adam, which means that the Eibishter, godliness, was in the realm of Shemayim. And in this world, that's where we were. And there was that was an unbridgeable divide. And then by Matan Torah, the Gzeira was revoked. And suddenly it became that El Yonim Yerdu Lamata, that Hashem comes down here into this world, as it says, Vayered Hashem al Har Sinai. And then also Tachtonim Yal Lamayla, as it says, Al Moshe Amar Alei Al Hashem. The whole point of Matan Torah is breaking this divide, and that through mitzvahs we're able to bring a lakus down here into this world. And so that is the Torah. The function of Torah is to bring godliness down into this world. If you imagine if you have a room that's filled with different machinery. And it's all with a lot of wires and a lot of cords, and all of it's connected to to a cord, a master cord, and comes a kid and plugs it into the socket, and suddenly everything starts whirring and working. The kid doesn't know how to make these machines. The kid doesn't know, has no way in the world of understanding how to make these elaborate, intricate machines that do. But he plugged it in, and suddenly everything starts working. The Torah is that room full of machinery. Every mitzvah is another machine. And when we do a mitzvah, we're putting in the plug. We don't know how to bring godliness down here in this world. We don't know how to make that machine. We don't know how to get the whole system running. So the Eibishter gave us ready-made, a packaged machine. And what is this machine? What are all these machines? It's a room full of machines. And the purpose of all of them is chesed, meaning the revelation of Hashem and drawing down Hashem into this world. And every time we do a mitzvah, actually a better example would be, the 613 machines, and each one has a plug. And every time you do the mitzvah, you take a coin, you throw it into a starter box, boom, you put in a plug, and that machine starts working, and boom, there's a Gili Alakus here in the world. You blow the shofar, that's another plug. And that whole apparatus begins working. So the whole Torah is chesed. So how is it that we're saying over here that Torah is Gevura, when it's not only that it is a chesed that Hashem gave us the Torah, which obviously that's a tremendous chesed, but when the essence of Torah is chesed.
Olam chesed yibaneh.
And that's relevant to Torah being chesed in which way?
No,
it's a pasuk about chesed. Okay, good. Okay. Let's look inside. Pirush. This is 9 lines from the top of the beginning of the Siman. Pirush, this means Shatoiram, Mekoira Visharshram, the source of the Torah, Hu Rak Chaste Hashem. This is the Chesed of Hashem. The source of Torah is Hashem's Chesed. Again, this is like openly contradicting what Alter Rebbe said earlier, that Torah is Gevura, right? That's what we started off saying. We're going to have to resolve that.
Yeah, exactly.
HaMechunim, the Chasadim of Hashem, are called B'Shem Yamin. They're Hashem's right hand. And that's why we say, Mi Yaminoi Eish Das Lamei, that the Torah, its source is Yamin, its source is Chesed. The Hainu, what does it mean that the Torah is Chesed? The Hainu, Hamshach, Has Bechinas Alakusa Yizbarech, the whole point of Torah is being Mamshich, drawing down, bringing down the godliness of Hashem, Va'ara, and the light, Ma'ir Ein Seif Baruch Hu, from the infinite light of Hashem, to the higher worlds, to the lower worlds, Ayidei Adam, and all this happens. That's the function of the Torah. But how does it actually happen? Through the person, Hamamshech Ha'ir Al Atzmai, who brings down, who draws down this light on himself, B'kiyum Ramach Mitzvah, by fulfilling the 248 Mitzvah Shehem Ramach Evren de Malka, which they are the 248 limbs of Hashem. So again, the Torah is the mechanism of bringing it down, but the actual doing it is when we do the mitzvah. Pirush. What does it mean that the Torah is 248 limbs of Hashem? Meaning, Ramach Kelim, Ulavushim Laha'ara, that the mitzvahs are the 248 vehicles and garments for the light, Laha'ara Ma'ir Ein Seif Baruch Hu, from the light, from the infinite light of Hashem, Hamalubash Behen, which is within the mitzvahs. Moreover, Ma'ir Zeh, from this light which you bring down, from this energy, this godliness that you bring down with every single mitzvah, Yum Shachla, you also bring down, it's also, that's the reason why we were able to have a spiritual experience in doing a mitzvah, and able to experience Abbas Hashem and Yiras Hashem. That is a byproduct of the light that we bring down into this world when we do a mitzvah. However, that this drawing down of Elokus, of godliness into the world through the mitzvahs, it first has to enter b'midas gvurasei shel HaKodesh Baruch Hu. It has to enter the gvura of Hashem, hamechuna b'shem eish, which is called fire. So now we're going to resolve the issue. Yes, the makar of Torah is Hashem's chesed. And not only the makar, the function of Torah is chesed. But in order for the oir, the purpose of the Torah, of Torah mitzvahs is to bring the oir Ein Sof down here into the world. But first that oir Ein Sof has to enter Hashem's gevura. It has to be contracted, which is like fire. The purpose is that we need to have the contraction. In other words, the making smaller of the light and their energy. Sorry?
That would be considered Gevura.
That's Gevura. This light and energy which comes from the infinite light of Hashem. Kedei, why? In order that it should be able to, this light should enter the action of the mitzvah. Because most of them are done with physical objects. We're trying to bring the light of Hashem down here into this world. But the infinite light of Hashem is too intense and too powerful. So therefore, it has to, that light first has to enter Gevura, the Eish, the Tzimtzum, in order for it to come into the world. Why? Yes. Because most mitzvahs are with physical things. For example, kitzitzis, like tzitzis is made out of wool. With tefillin made out of animal hide. The karbanis that are from animals, with tzedakah, which is given with money. So because we're trying to bring down godliness into physical objects, so yes, although the function of Torah is chesed, but that chesed, that of Hashem, that the energy of Hashem, which we're bringing into this world through the mitzvah, first has to enter Hashem's gevura to be contracted. Va'af mitzvah shein beruchni sa'adam, and even mitzvahs that are involve ruchni, the spiritual elements of the person. For example, Yira v'ava, for example, Yiras Hashem and Avas Hashem. So two mitzvahs which are, one of them is awe of Hashem, and one of them is love of Hashem. And these are, they don't involve any physical object. Unlike tzitzis and tefillin and karbanis and tzedakah, which all of them require a physical object. Right? You can't put on a spiritual talit and make a lisatev batzitzis. That's not the mitzvah. You can't bring a spiritual animal as a carbon. So therefore, because in the physical mitzvahs, we understand why the light has to be contracted. But how about spiritual mitzvahs? Maybe over there, the light that enters the person through those mitzvahs doesn't have to be contracted. Alter Rebbe says, Afal Pikein, nevertheless, 4 lines from the bottom, in Bebechinas Gvula Midah. Those mitzvahs too are limited. V'loi Bebechinas Ein Sof Klal. These mitzvahs are not at all unlimited. Why? Ki Avar Rabba Lashem B'li Gvul, B'li Keitzu Gvula Midah. A tremendous love for Hashem that has no end and has no limit and no measure. A person cannot contain that, tolerate that in his heart, and to remain alive in his body even 1 moment. That is the idea of what's called klois hanefesh. If a person would have an unlimited love for Hashem, the neshama would simply leave their body. The body cannot contain an unlimited amount of love. And historically, there have been people who have had such incredible spiritual experiences that they actually passed away from it. Their neshamas left their body. The case, obviously, the two that come to mind immediately are Nadav and Avihu. The way the HaKodesh HaKodesh explains it, Bekarvasam lefnei Hashem vayamusu. Bekarvasam lefnei Hashem, they approached Hashem, they became very close to Hashem, and they passed away. We know there's last week's parsha on Chukas, we have Aaron and Miriam who passed away with Neshika, which means that they experienced, there was a Neshika is an intense, unlimited divine revelation which the body cannot contain, and the neshama just leaves. The Chaim says that by Nadav and Avihu, they had the Neshika in reverse. By Aaron and Miriam, the Neshika was the result of Hashem coming close to them. Nadav and Avihu was bekarvasam lefnei Hashem. They did it. They approached the Ur and Saf, and their bodies couldn't contain it any longer.
So who was stronger?
Sorry?
Nadav and Avihu or Miriam and Aaron? Who was
who was better off? Well, the kavanah isn't. Nadav and Avihu, what they did, that's not the way that we're supposed to live. We're supposed to v'chai b'hem. We have. Now they did it. Sorry, it wasn't an avera. It wasn't an avera because they were not yet commanded not to do it. But subsequent to them, it's not an aveda which we're supposed to do. For them, that was their aveda. There's a whole sikha from the Rebbe. The Rebbe says, on Yom Kippur, when we get close to Hashem, what do we read? Achrei Mais, because we draw our power from them to get close to Hashem as much as possible. But for us, what does the pasuk say? Achrei Mais shnei bnei Aaron b'karvas b'nei Shem v'yimusu, and then it's Vayim Hashem el Aaron, right? Daber l'Aaron echicha, v'yavi b'chal eis al HaKodesh, me'eis la'pareiches v'lo yamos. Hashem says, no, I don't. None of you did that, but you guys, that's how we begin the parsha Achrei Mais, right? Tell Aaron v'al yavi b'chal eis al HaKodesh not to do it, v'lo yamos, and he shouldn't pass away. Because ultimately Hashem wants us to do mitzvahs over here. And we have to, I don't know if the people in this room have to worry about that and be careful about not reaching the place of spiritual ecstasy to the point that we're worried that the neshama is going to leave us. What?
How would you accomplish that?
How would you accomplish that? But the story is told about the Alter Rebbe. I've mentioned this in the past, I believe, that the Alter Rebbe was, when he came to Mezrich, so he would learn with Rabbi Avram the Malach, the son of the Mezritcher Magid. His name was Rabbi Avram, and he was known as Rabbi Avram the Malach, a very, very holy person. And when the Alter Rebbe came, the Alter Rebbe was a novice in Kabbalah. The Alter Rebbe came, he was probably around 17 years old when he came. And he didn't come from a family of Hasidim. I mean, there were very few people did come then from a family of Hasidim. It was just in the beginning of Hasidus. But he was a goyin. At that point already, the Alter Rebbe was a goyin olam. He was already a tremendous goyin. A nigla, right. So he learned with the son of the Magid, and he taught the son of the Magid Gemara, and the Magid son taught him Hasidus. I'm sure that the Magid knew more Gemara than I do, and I'm sure the Alter Rebbe knew more Chassidus than I do, even at that point already. But we're saying their relative strengths at that point in time was the Magid, the son, was the stronger one at that time in Chassidus, and at that time the Alter Rebbe was the stronger one in Nigla. And they say that the Alter Rebbe he he would turn the clock back. Because the Maggid's son, he was so removed, he didn't realize that Rebbe would just turn the clock and then he would stretch the time for learning Chassidus. Some extra time. They're supposed to learn, let's say, an hour, so he would keep moving the clock back. So the Maggid's son shouldn't realize the time isn't up yet. And afterwards he said about that time, which he stole, he said, Mayim gnuvim yimtaku. Stolen water, the water with the Chassidus that he learned in that stolen time was extra sweet. Like upon him, one time after they had a session, they learned Chassidus, and then a few minutes later, the Maggid's son comes and sees the Alter Rebbe is eating a bagel with butter. Now today, a bagel with butter, if I'm thinking my top 10 list of delicacies, I'm probably not thinking of a bagel with butter. There's probably better things that I can, if I want to be mamala taiva, if I have a taiva, I'm going to think of better food than a bagel and butter. But back then, a bagel and butter was considered
high class.
Yeah, like today, if you saw someone looking at a bagel and butter, you wouldn't think, that's like it's like today. Imagine you seeing a big Talmid Chacham sitting with a big steak and with a bottle and a cup of expensive wine. That's a bagel and butter was on that level then. So the Maggid says, I don't understand. We're just busy learning about Atzilus and the Malachim and the Merkava, and now you're eating a bagel and butter. And Alter Rebbe explained to him that he actually felt. He was scared. His neshama was about to leave because he was feeling that kind of dveikus, and he needed to
go down.
He needed to ground himself in something physical, right?
Wow.
So, if the neshama were to feel, the a'ava and yira for Hashem, which is unlimited, it would leave. As Hashem told Moshe, when Moshe said, "Hareini nos kvedacha," what did Hashem say? Kila yirani ha'adam v'chay, right? And in fact, we mentioned two people who did it. It turns out there was a time when it happened in mass. Hundreds of thousands of Yidden all died. All died because they experienced infinite revelation of Hashem. When was that? Har Sinai, very good. Shebeshas, there we go. K'maymer Azal, bottom line over here. K'maymer Azal Chazal tell us. Shebeshas Matan Torah, by Matan Torah Shoyse Yizgalus Alakusa Yizbarach, there's revelation of Hashem. Rabbi says, Vayidaber Halikim. Hashem spoke. What is speaking? This is something we've spoken about length when we learned Shaykh V'Amunah. What is speaking? Speaking is Gilui. Communication is revelation. So Hashem revealed himself to the Yidden at Har Sinai, and what happens? They all died. Baruch Nishmasan, right? It was this galus of Elakusa Yisbarach V'Erin Seif Baruch Hu. This galus of the Erin Seif V'Bechinas Dibur of this galus Baruch Nishmasan. They all died and had to be revived afterwards.
And they told Moshe, Daber imanu ata.
Right. They told Moshe, dying, we died a few times. Dying is not good for the heart. So let's maybe from now on you talk to us instead of Hashem. But what we see from over here is that we cannot. So even what he's saying is that even the mitzvahs that are spiritual mitzvahs are also limited. In other words, a lot of times we tend to think physical is limited, finite. Spiritual is infinite. No, our emotions also are limited. The Baal Shem, sorry?
Eliyahu Navi, did he die? He took the whole guf, he left.
No, he didn't die. No.
He didn't die at all. That's not called Misa.
Eliyahu Navi was something special. Eliyahu Navi was able to work on his body to the extent that his body was so mezuchach, was so refined, that it actually was able to handle it. And it can go up to heaven and experience everything in heaven. Which is very...
No, but he converted his guf into a davar ruchni.
Who said? I didn't say that.
No?
No.
He said he refined it in such a...
He refined the Gashmias to the point that it's able to actually accept those Giluim, which is a very big exception. Even Moshe Rabbeinu didn't do that. Even Moshe Rabbeinu died and was buried.
With Nashik.
Sorry?
He died with Nashik.
Yeah, it doesn't make a difference.
It's interesting, Chassidus is explained.
But he also experienced Shemayim when he went...
Who? Moshe Rabbeinu.
Yeah.
With it, right. Interesting point. But at a certain point, his guf needed to have the vel ofar tashuv. It wasn't 100% refined, and Eliyahu was. It didn't need the vel ofar tashuv.
They have another Navi that went to Shemayim. Elisha? No?
I think in Tanya Eliyahu it says there were 10 people who went up to Shemayim, but in Torah it talks about only one. The Torah Shebiksav. Doesn't say it in Torah Shebiksav. I know. But look in the Pashtani Amikra, what do they say? It doesn't say clearly, the Eliyahu Navi says clearly that his guf went to heaven.
It said, Allah b'sa'ara shamayma.
Yeah. It's interesting is that In Chassidus, it's explained that Eliyahu Hanavi, he was born with a guf, with a body which was very coarse, very begushim, actually. There's a medrash that says that Eliyahu Hanavi's mother was pregnant with him for 12 months. Which means that he was hyper overdeveloped. His gashmius was very developed. Contrast that with Moshe Rabbeinu, whose mother was pregnant with him only for 6 months, which means that his guf was underdeveloped. His neshama was very powerful and his guf was very weak by Moshe Rabbeinu. Talking, obviously he had a strong body, we know the different things, but relatively speaking, the gashmius aspect of it was underdeveloped. But because Eliyahu Navi was so challenged by his body, he had to work on it so much that ultimately he was able to be mevarer to the point that he was able to go to heaven. Moshe Rabbeinu was more or less able to ignore his body because it didn't really pose serious opposition to him, because it was a weak gashmius. But ultimately, because he didn't have to work on his body too much, he also wasn't mevarer and mizachah. He didn't purify his body as much as Eliyahu Navi did. Eliyahu Navi was forced to, and that's one of the reasons why Eliyahu Navi is the Mevasar HaGeula, which is related to the end of this week's parsha, beginning of next week's parsha, Pinchas Eliyahu. And what is the greatness of Eliyahu? Because Eliyahu Navi is going to herald in that time, Taka, when the whole world will become completely mezuchach, refined, and the Ein Sof will be revealed in this world, which is what Eliyahu Navi experienced in his own body, which is why he has a special connection to Mashiach. That's a side note. So, the Baal Shem Tov famously says that Hashem has a love for every single Yid, like the love of the elderly couple that didn't have children for many years, and they had one child, a single child, a ben yachid, their old age. That's how much Hashem loves every single child, every single Yid. Think about that for a moment. I don't know if anyone over here in this room is a only child. I don't know if anyone over here maybe has an only child, but just imagine the love that parents have for an only child, especially parents that have suffered infertility for many years, and after many years of trying, finally they had a child. Imagine the love they have for that child. That's the love that Hashem has for every single Yid. And by the way, every single Yid includes you. You know, sometimes we think about it like, yeah, that's the love Hashem has for Yidden. No. That's the love Hashem has for me. That's the love that Hashem has for you and for you and for you. Right? Every single. It's a crazy, mind-blowing thought. You ever think that Hashem loves you that much, Reuven? You ever realize how much Hashem loves you? Think of for a second, but how much parents love their ben yachid. That's how much Hashem loves you. And even more than that. And the Rebbe explains what is the even more than that. Because the emes is that the love that Hashem has for Yidden is believable. Pasuk says, "Ahavti eschem amar Hashem." Right? Malachi says, "Ahavti eschem amar Hashem." Hashem says that He loves us, and just as Hashem is infinite, His love is infinite. Hashem's love for us is infinite. It's infinite and it's everlasting. Va'ahavas olam ahavtich. Right? Hashem says, "I love you forever." In other words, it's not conditional. What does it mean forever? When I say I love you forever, what does it mean I love you forever? That means nothing can change it. I know it'll be there in 100 years, 200 years. How do I know that? Maybe you'll do something bad. Maybe. But if love is conditional, so then, yeah, it fluctuates. But when love is unconditional, like the love of parents to a child, it's Avas Olam. Now that kind of love, an infinite, unconditional love, is not something which the human heart can contain. Period. We can't relate to how much Hashem loves us. I can't relate to how much Hashem loves me. It's unfathomable how much Hashem loves me. And I'm using the word me over here, not because I'm trying to be narcissistic, but because I think it's important for when we talk about this to actually personalize it. And instead of talking about it in like more impersonal, what? Yeah. But the Baal Shem Tov wants to give me some sort of concept of what Ava is, of how much Hashem loves me. So what is that the Baal Shem Tov does? He found the greatest example of love that exists in the human realm, because that's what we can relate to. And then he says, you should know that Hashem loves you even more than that. How much more? Infinitely more. But The best example is a limited example, but ultimately, even these parents who have their only child, their capacity for love, their heart is limited, and Hashem is unlimited.
Yeah.
And that's similar to this point of the Rebbe saying over here that even the mitzvahs, that every mitzvah that we do is limited. Even the mitzvah, the spiritual mitzvahs, such as Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem, are also limited because our hearts are limited. And that's why the energy, the godliness that we bring into the world with every mitzvah is limited, which is why we say that the Torah has to go to Eish. Yes, the Torah, its makar is chesed, but ultimately it has to come into Gevura because the God, the Eir and Sof that the Torah brings into this world has to be first contained and restricted. B'pia Gevura. V'hinei because the mitzvahs, as mentioned, although all the mitzvahs begin as Hashem's chesed, but they come down into Gevura. And by the way, this is something which happens all the time. I love my kid a lot. I sent him off to camp this week. This week, right? How much money should I give my kid when I send him off to camp? 20? But I love him so much. $20? 40. I think my love for my kid is at least $1,000.
Whoa. For camp?
One day you'll have I'm not talking about camp, I'm talking about how much I love my kid.
Oh, I thought you said camp.
Yeah, he's going to camp. My question is how much money to give him. So this is a case where my chesed says one thing, but it has to come into Gevura, and I have to figure out what my son can reasonably contain without doing stupid things, or so that all the time, something which starts off as chesed, it has to go through the process of Gevura, of contraction, in order for it to be able to properly benefit its recipient. And that's what the Rebbe is saying the same thing here about Torah mitzvahs. The Torah begins as Hashem's chesed, and it begins with the idea that the Eir and Sof has to enter this world. But it has to then go through the process of Gevura in order for our world to be able to contain it. So because the mitzvahs were given to us, the mitzvahs were first entered Gevura and Tzimtzum. Therefore, so as a result, most mitzvahs have an actual limitation on them. For example, tzitzis have to be, the length of tzitzis have to be 12 thumb, the width of a thumb. And it's important to understand, that's the mitzvah. Less than that is not the mitzvah, more than that is not the mitzvah. Meaning, if you did less than that, if your tzitzis are 11 gudlin, you weren't mekayim the mitzvah. Okay, there are different halachas if it gets torn. I'm not getting into that, but for looking at Shulchan Aruch and seeing what the halacha is. And if you have tzitzis that are 5 feet long, you didn't do a bigger mitzvah. It's not like you did. There's a limit. The mitzvah has a limit. It's 12 gudlin. That's the mitzvah. Not more, not less. You could do more. You can have longer, but the mitzvah is 12. More than that isn't more mitzvah. Tefillin have to be two finger breaths by 2 finger breaths. And once again, that's it can't be less. And if you did it more, you're going to make a tefillin the size of a watermelon. That's and then a muruboy is dafka, and then they have to be dafka squares. Let's say I want to say, you know what? I want to be mahader in the mitzvah.
Make it circle.
Not circle. But instead of having 4 corners, because I love the mitzvah so much, I'm going to make it 6 corners. I'll make it a pentagon or a hexagon, or whatever other. If 4 mitzvahs is a mitzvah, can you imagine if I make it 5 corners or 6 corners? By the way, tzitzis is not an issue. You can have taka beget, but in tefillin, no. Here's an instance where actually it has to be 4 corners, and if it's 3 corners, it's not a mitzvah, and if it's 5 corners, it's not. It ruins it. So you see, there's a limit. Most mitzvahs have a limit. Some mitzvahs, less is no good, and more doesn't add to it. Some mitzvahs, less is no good, and more also is no good. And if it's more, you want yitzah.
But the tefillin is the cloth, it's not the bite outside. So what? Why we so?
It's that also.
It's both. It's both together.
Both.
If you have the cloth, you're going to put cloth on your head. You did the mitzvah. And there's halacha l'mishim Sinai, which tells us exactly what the tefillin have to be. And by the way, there are many limitations on the klaf also, but he's not giving every single example. He's just giving a few examples there.
Since it's allowed to have more than 4 corners?
The beged is allowed to have more than 4 corners.
Beged.
Yeah, and then you'd put on the 4 on 4 of the corners of the garment.
Oh,
Yeah.
so, okay.
Don't do.
V'halulav dalat tfachim. A lulav has to be 4 tfachim high. Again, same thing over here. Not more, not less. And if it's more, you didn't add to the mitzvah. V'asukkah zayin tfachim. The sukkah has to be not the height. The height has to be 10 tfachim, but the width of the sukkah has to be at least 7 tfachim. V'ashayfer tefach. Shayfer has to be a tefach. V'hamikvah memsa. Mikvah has to be minimum of 40 saw, which is a liquid measurement. And once again, 40 saw. If you did more than 40 saw, it's a nicer mikvah. It would be more comfortable for you to go into it, but you didn't do more of a mitzvah if there was more water in the mikvah. I don't know if the mikvah is hotter, maybe it's a bigger mitzvah. I don't know. That's something we can debate. Sorry?
That's it.
Definitely more time, right? V'chein b'karbanis. Till now we're talking about spatial measurements. But the same thing when it comes to karbana is yashlan shir mitzum tzum lisman. They have a shir when it comes to time. So here we're seeing time limitations. K'moi kvasim b'nei shana. If you want to bring a keves, you want to bring a sheep as a carbon, it has to be within its first year. Ve'elim b'nei shtayim. You want to bring a ram has to be under 2 years old. Uparam chulu. And there's also a limit for oxen, for cattle. The same thing when it comes to tzedakah with one's money, even though that tzedakah is from the pillars upon which the world stands. The pasuk said, "Olam chesed yibana." You hear? Sasan, you remember that pasuk? Olam chesed yibana. The world is built upon and established upon chesed. Nevertheless, even though literally the world stands on tzedakah, yesh la shir katsu, it has a shir. You want to do mitzvah and amufcha, you give 20%. And if you are going the average is 10%. So let's stop over here. We'll continue with Hashem next week. But what we have over here so far is this idea that mitzvahs are limited because we're limited. Ramesha, might bring me a chumash, Bamidbar. Thank you. The mitzvahs are limited because we're limited, and the light, the infinite light of Hashem that comes into the mitzvah is also limited. The Alter Rebbe will continue, what we're going to learn in Mitzvah Hashem next week, is that everything that we're talking up until this point is for tzaddikim. But for someone who has done Averis, and someone who wants to do tshuva, for reasons we'll talk about next week, over there, you can't serve Hashem in a limited fashion. That person has to graduate to a service of Hashem which is beyond limits. That we'll talk about in Mitzvah Hashem next week, but that relates, this idea of limitations versus beyond limit, is relates to something we have in this week's parsha. In this week's parsha it says, Vayakam Bilam Babikar. Bilam wakes up in the morning, Vayachvish Sasoine, and he saddles his donkey, Vayilachem Sari Moav, and he goes with the dignitaries of Moav. So what does Rashi say? Vayachvish Sasoine, he saddled his donkey. Imagine that. What?
Like Avraham Avinu.
Yeah, but just imagine that. Imagine that this respected sorcerer, the whole world, everyone's busy coming and paying him huge sums of money in order to curse different countries and people. Right? What does Rashi say in Pseira? That he was like a shulchani. He was like a money changer. He was like this money changer. Everyone's bringing money to him. All the kings, Iggeres, they're sending him letters with money, asking them. And he probably wasn't a young guy either, although that's an assumption. I don't know. And here he is saddling his donkey. Where's his servants? Where's his So what does Rashi say on that? Mekan, from here we see, he definitely had servants. He must have been a phenomenally wealthy person. But from here we see Shasina Mikalkalas es Ashura. That when you hate, you do stupid things. We all know that, right? Sina Mikalkalas Ashura. When you hate something or someone, you'll do things that make no sense. Shachava Shuba Atzmi. He himself saddled his donkey, even though his hatred for Klal Yisrael was so strong and so great that he was so eager to go and curse them that he himself saddled his donkey. Amar HaKodesh Baruch Hu, Hashem tells them, Rasha, Kvar Kadamcha Avram Aviyim. You already preceded, you were preempted, you were trumped by Avram, their father. Shenemar Vayashkim Avram Abekar. Avram woke up early in the morning, and he saddled his donkey. A beautiful Rashi, right? Any questions? Any problems on this with this Rashi?
Yeah, because Avram had two people going with him. He had nobody going with him.
It's not a question on this Rashi. Yeah. And he had people going with him. He had plenty of people going with him. It says. Something we've spoken about in the past. The Rebbe has this habit of taking things that sound so beautiful and poking holes in them, like until you're like, yeah, what does that mean? And then rebuilding them until you find a completely new and deeper depth in them. The Rebbe says, what does this mean? So Bilam he was this horrible, grotesque, disgusting person who hated Klal Yisrael. So he goes and he saddles his donkey, even though he shouldn't have. And Hashem has to respond to him and say, you Rasha, that's not going to have any impact. Avram already, he did the same thing. Why should it have any impact? Why did Hashem have to respond to him? Why should there be any significance whatsoever to what he did, to the extent that we need Avram to preempt him? It's because he's a despicable goy who hates Yidden and did something disgusting, and he's running to curse the Yidden. So that's something special which requires some sort of preemption. There's something that doesn't fit over here. It's as if he was doing something and making a certain point and doing something special, to which Hashem says, nice try, but it's not going to work because Avram already did the same thing. But why is there any significance, any positive significance to what he's done, to the extent that we need to even, that we have to turn back to Avram Avinu? So the Rebbe discusses this in a Sikha, and the Rebbe says that Bilam knew that Hashem doesn't want to curse the Yidden. Hashem made that very clear to them. He said, don't go. Ki baruch hu, don't curse them because they're blessed. Now what happened? Bilam went, as Rashi says, he thought, maybe I'll be able to figure out somehow, some way to convince Hashem to be able to curse them. One of his tactics that he did was that he would try to remind Hashem of different Averis the Yidden did or will do. As we see later on in Rashi, so he went to Shittim, looking over Po'er. So this too, Bilam was a calculated person. Everything he did had symbolism. The symbolism he was trying to say about the Kalkelas is Sashura. He was telling Hashem, you see, I'm doing something stupid. The Yidden do stupid things also. They do Averis also. So I'm doing a shtus. It's to remind, he was trying to remind Hashem that there's this concept of shtus out there, which the Yidden also do. The Yidden do Averis and they have shtus, and therefore the Yidden are worthy of being cursed. And that's why Hashem responds to them and says, you Rasha, you're forgetting something. You're forgetting Avram Avinu. Avram Avinu, Ava Mikal Kalas Asashur, he also did a shtus. He also saddled his donkey, even though that he had 318 servants, because he loved me so much. And that Ava of Avram Avinu, and it's Avihem, as Rashi says, Avram Avihem, it's their father. It's therefore every single Yid also has this capacity to serve Hashem in a way of shtus, in a way higher than Medida of Agbala, higher than any limitation or restriction. That has preempted what you're saying. And yes, even though once in a while a Yid will do an Aveder, will do a shtus, but that's not really who he is. Really, who is a Yid? A Yid is a Ben Avraham. A person who a person who does things for Hashem and higher than Medida of Agbala, higher than limitation. And that's why Bilam, what he said, didn't work. So we see here also there's this concept of serving Hashem in a way of Mikalkelas as Ashura. Yes, there's the Shura, there's the line. The Torah tells us the limitations of mitzvah, certain limitations. And then there's this idea of serving Hashem in a way which is higher than that. And how do we do that? That we'll learn about in Yirtzeh Hashem next week.
Thank you.